Sup guys, dinofries here, and welcome to episode 16 of the Dinofries Show, my podcast, where we talk to interesting people. Today we have Kate Gray. Kate Gray, who are you?
Hello. I am the writer and community manager of the just released game Moonstone Island.
Yes. Yeah, so what do you mean by community manager and then writer?
Good question. Initially, I was just the writer. Before that, I was a games journalist. I still am a
Okay.
games journalist. And I wrote about Moonstone Island, and then Sandy messaged me, Sandy being the lead developer and director of Moonstone Island, messaged me being like, well, if you like the game so much, why don't you make it? And the message was nicer than
Yeah,
that,
of course.
obviously. But asked me to write the game. And so for over a year now, I've been in charge of writing mostly the NPCs in the game, the dates and their daily dialogue, things like that. And then slowly I started just taking more things on, doing item descriptions.
Yeah, of course.
Also game descriptions. I wrote everything that's like on the Steam page and everything like that. And then once the writing was done, we sent it off to localization. I was sort of like, what do I do now? And Sandy said, well, we're looking for a community manager. Do you have any experience? And luckily enough, I do. I used to be community manager for Ultimate Chicken Horse, which is
I know
another
that game.
Canadian game.
Yeah, I know that game. That's a fun game.
It's a good game.
Yeah.
I'm still apparently doing community management. I'm not, but you should buy it and play it. That's my opinion. Anyway, so yeah, I was like, I've run a lot of Twitters. I've done Discord moderation. I can do all of that. If you need somebody, it would be a lot easier to have someone who's already on the team, doesn't need to be onboarded, knows most of the answers. And so I transitioned over to that a couple months ago. It's been a bit of a blur, honestly. And so that's what I'm doing now, which involves mostly running the Discord, running the Twitter. Oh my God, I do so many little things. Like I write all the Steam posts. I write the patch notes. Anything that involves writing is usually me. We have a newsletter going out soon. It's like lots and lots of little writing tasks, which is sort of like not always what a community manager does, but with such a tiny team, there's just 4 people, including me. So it makes sense that we wear a lot of different hats. So basically, anything that's writing.
Put Moonstone Island together?
4 people, yeah. There's a lot of artists that helped out, but like the main people is me as the writer and community manager, Kokofi, who is our artist, Stan, who's our programmer, and of course Sandy, who does everything else.
Got it. I probably should have said this earlier, but what is Moonstone Island?
Oh yeah, good point. Moonstone Island is a creature collecting life sim, which sort of smashes together a bunch of different genres that mostly Sandy really like. So there's a lot of Pokemon in there. That's the creature collecting part. There's a lot of Slay the Spire in there. There's a card battling. Game. That's how you do the Pokemon fights. There's a lot of Harvest Moon in there. A lot of people say, wow, this game reminds me of Stardew Valley. And that's fine. We really like Stardew Valley. But actually, we're more inspired by Harvest Moon, which is older than Stardew Valley. That's also where Stardew Valley came from. So we have a lot of Harvest Moon in there.
Yeah.
But we're also like huge farming game fans. There's a lot of everything in there. It's really also got a lot of Studio Ghibli, which we also love.
Yeah, definitely the house, right? There's like that the magic guy's house that like walks around, right? Like on like feet. Yeah, that I remember the first time I saw that, I was like, yeah, that's very Ghibli inspired. I don't know if that was, but that's immediately what I think of.
Probably.
Yeah.
We find it hard to keep track of all the Ghibli references, but like there's so much. There's Spirited Away, Howl's Moving Castle, Kiki's Delivery Service, My Neighbor Totoro. There's all in there. It's all in there.
Yeah. I want to ask you then. So like how? So you said before you are a games or you were a games journalist. Why don't you tell me like how you got here, you know, where you started and your journey.
Okay, so roughly 10 years ago, I was at university studying classics, which is Latin and ancient Greek, and I didn't want to do a job that would involve those things. The only jobs you can really do are like, working as
Wait,
a
you
teacher
studied
or,
Latin?
yeah.
Why?
Um, good question. I really liked English. I like literature and I like language, and it just happened to be the thing that combined all of those things in a really nice way. I think I know a lot of people are like, "Oh, Latin, that's not
Yeah.
useful," and it
Well, I
doesn't
think
have to be
it's
useful.
certainly useful if you want to be like a master of the English
Yeah,
language and other
yeah,
languages, to be honest, because I mean, Latin was the root of
exactly.
almost everything,
Yeah,
and it helps you to understand certain correlations between like what certain parts of what words mean throughout many languages. So I get why you would study Latin. I just said that
exactly.
in terms of like I know that it's not very practical in today's world.
It's not. I mean, at the time, it was like, oh, I have to pick something for university, and this is the thing I enjoy most. And it
Yeah.
is quite wide ranging. When you take classics, it's half of it is the languages, and the other half you can study literature, history, philosophy, religion, medicine. There's a bunch of different things you can choose from.
Hmm.
And so it gave me the freedom to kind of look at a bunch of different things and not have to really pick what I was interested in. Because if you do a degree that's English or French, it's much stricter what you can do.
Hmm.
So I was doing that, and I knew that I didn't want to be like a researcher or a teacher or anything really to do with my degree. So mostly I was doing a lot of extracurricular stuff. The university I went to, we had a newspaper. Most universities do. We also had a YouTube channel where we did like TV stuff. And so I joined both of those. And I knew I wanted to be a writer, but I didn't really know what I wanted to write about. But there was a games section in the newspaper, and I was like, oh, I play games. I guess I wouldn't really consider myself a gamer, but I love games.
Right.
Um, because at that point, gamer was like, Call of Duty,
Sure.
like
Right.
hardcore games, and I was like, well, I have a DS and I've played Nintendo games my entire life, but those aren't really games. I got over that very quickly. Don't worry. So I started writing for the game section of the newspaper, and it was really fun. And I wrote a lot of really stupid stuff. I wrote a few reviews. I got to go to a few conventions. And it was a lot of fun, but I didn't really think like this is a career. But then when I got to the end of university and everyone starts asking, what are you going to do? And I'm like, I don't know. I'll write about games. I've been doing that for 3 years now. I guess I could just continue to do that. It can't be that hard, right? I graduated. It turns out jobs are really hard to get. So I
Yeah.
worked in a call center for a little bit. And I was like, wow, this sucks. I got fired from the call center because I kept getting distracted. Even though I was doing really well on calls, I would be like, looking at Twitter or whatever while I'm on the phone calls, because you spend a lot of time on hold anyway. So they didn't like that. And I was like, well, fine. Um, and I applied. My friend sent me a job post to work at Official Nintendo magazine. And I was like, they're not going to hire me. I don't really have any experience. But then they did, for reasons I still don't fully understand. Apparently, 650 people applied. And they were like, this one that doesn't know anything about F-Zero, that's the one. That's the one you should write for Official Nintendo magazine.
That's cool.
I'm downplaying it. I'm a good writer.
Yeah.
Hopefully, people know this by now. But they made me do a quiz, and the quiz was about like Kirby, and at that point, I'd never played Kirby, and so I was just like, I don't know the answers to like maybe a third of these questions. I'm just going to do little pictures and write jokes. And I think that's what they wanted more than anything, was someone who could do really stupid jokes. So I worked there until they closed the magazine down. And then I
Oh,
worked for a
that's
bunch of different places.
is that that's Nintendo Power or is that different?
No, it's Official Nintendo magazine was
Official
like a
Nintendo magazine.
British magazine, and like it was pre-Switch era. This was like the Wii U era, so nobody was really playing Nintendo games. And
Right.
so no one was buying the magazine, which makes sense. And also print media is slowly dying.
Yeah.
So they decided to close the magazine down. And I was like, well, what do we do now? So they moved me onto official Xbox magazine. And at that point, I hadn't really played many Xbox games. Like Fable was one of my
Yeah,
favorites.
I played Fable. That's a cool game.
But I had to learn very quickly about everything Xbox related. And luckily now I know everything that there is to know. I have Xbox Game Pass Ultimate. I have worked for actual Xbox. So now I know what I'm talking about. But back then I was like, what is Xbox? Help. But it was a trial by fire, and I learned a lot and reviewed lots of games. And then I started working for Xbox on their YouTube channel, being one of their hosts for a little
Oh,
while.
that's
fun.
fun. Yeah.
And then, that was all like 10 years ago. So then, I did a bunch of journalism and now I'm here. That's the short thing.
Got it. Yeah. Very cool. I actually used to be a journalist as well. Well, no, I guess I used to be like a full-time reporter for like a newspaper, like on the ground, like going to events and stuff like that. But now I write for a video game website on the side. So I'm also a writer. I get it.
Cool.
I get it. But I
still do stuff from time to time. I'm still reviewing games actively. But I just only review the ones I want to review. So it's much easier now. Yay.
So I was gonna say, was Moonstone Island the first like video game you've had a part in?
No, I've written a few at this point. There wasn't really much writing in Ultimate Chicken Horse, so I didn't really.
Right. Oh, so you weren't just a community manager for Ultimate Chicken Horse, like you have.
No, I was just community manager on that one. But then I started working at a different studio in Canada, and I wrote a game called Winding Worlds, which was an Apple Arcade exclusive. It did really well, but like the thing with Apple Arcade games is like no one has heard of them outside of Apple Arcade.
I didn't even really know that there was like an Apple Arcade like market until you probably know Hello Kitty Adventure. Do you know that game that came out recently?
I did,
like, whoa, this looks so cool. And then my girlfriend has an iPhone. I have an Android, whatever. But
Me too.
I was like, babe, sign up for this this subscription or whatever because I want to play. But yeah, go on.
Yeah, it was one of the early Apple Arcade games. Actually, I don't remember if it was a launch title, but it was very early on. So we got a lot of cool people liking the game, but mostly within the Apple ecosystem. So it has a ton of like really, really glowing reviews on the App Store, but like outside of that, no one's really heard of it. Yeah, so I've worked on, I feel like a lot of games at this point. But Winding Worlds was my first writing game, and that was very exciting for me. And then, since then I've worked on a lot of little projects. Like I have my own personal games that I'm probably never going to release. And then Moonstone Island's kind of the biggest one, I would say, like the most writing that I have done. But I'm already working on like 2 more projects in the future for other studios. So
I was gonna say, like, you don't do any coding, you just do the writing.
Okay, you have reminded me that technically I do have a first game that I ever made. That I did everything for. I did the programming.
Oh wow.
Everything. It's not a big game. It's called Awkward Dating Simulator.
Okay.
And it's basically just a bunch of instructions to follow on a date.
Yeah.
And it's like a glorified PowerPoint presentation, really. But I coded it. I made it work myself. That's on itch.io. You can play that. Technically, I also have a few other games that I've written. I completely forgot about all this until you just said. I made a game once with my partner that is called Mr. Mayor, it's got a really long title. It's like Mr. Mayor reads your fortune, tells a story, and offers you snacks.
Okay. What's
So I
that
did all the
about?
writing for that. What is it about? It's like this guy, this character that looks like the Pringles man with the big
Mm-hmm.
mustache.
Mm-hmm.
And just like the title says, he reads your fortune with tarot cards that I drew. He tells your fortune through that, and then he tells you a random story about his life, and then at the end he offers you snacks. Um, I didn't do the programming or anything else on this one. I just did the writing and the tarot card art, and you can tell it's janky. But the thing is that we made it on a train in 3 days. So I honestly think that it's a pretty good game for something that we made in 3 days. And
Yeah.
that is also on itch.io. There's another game I made called Move On, which was also for a game jam, which that has a ton of writing in it that I completely forgot that I did. It's about this church, this spooky church, and all the weird things that happen in the church over the centuries, the millennia of the church existing. That's also on itch.io. You can buy it now. It's free to buy it. Yeah, lots of games. I made a lot of games. I forgot.
So you would say like that started out as kind of a hobby, uh, on the side
Yeah,
of doing games journalism.
absolutely. Games journalism is awesome, but it is not particularly financially stable or just generally stable because they keep closing down various journalism outlets and firing everybody. And so I knew that I needed to start figuring out what was next. And so I started taking a few courses in coding and things like that and participating in game jams, which is a really good way to get into game making because, it's got a deadline and there's a ton of people who are willing to help you. So I would recommend that for anybody who's thinking about getting into game development in any way.
Yeah. What is a game jam?
Good question. A game jam is a time limited game making sort of competition. It doesn't always have a winner. Some of them do. Some of them are just like make a game in 3 days, in a weekend, in a month. They all have different time limits. Maybe the biggest one, there's a few, but the biggest one I think is Ludum Dare, which does have a winner. It has a winner in a bunch of different categories, and then it has an overall winner. So it's a good one, but it's kind of scary because you're competing with other people, and they all usually have themes. So Ludum Dare will be like, okay, 2023's Ludum Dare theme is they're always really specific. Boxes within boxes, and you can kind of take that theme and do whatever you want with it. Really, it's very loose.
That sounds so. That sounds cool. So basically, it just invites people interested in making games.
Yeah, pretty much.
You said it gives them resources, or everyone's kind of on their own there?
Yeah. So the way that game jams normally work is that people will want to work in teams. Most people can't make an entire game on their own. So they'll come to a game jam being like, all right, well, I'm a programmer and I'm looking for an artist and a musician and maybe a sound designer. Or you can come in and say, I'm a sound designer and I want to work for you. And you might end up working on a bunch of different projects just because sound design isn't quite as like time consuming as something like programming, which you kind of need to be there for the whole time. So generally people make up teams. Some of them they formed before the game jam. So like I made a game with my partner. But some of them you'll have the resources to find a team within the game jam. And they'll usually, if you're a new writer, you can go in and say, I'm a new writer, but I would really love to try my hand at writing something. And if anybody's looking for a writer, they might be willing to bring you on and help you a little bit. Because, the stakes are kind of low most of the time with a game jam. Most of the games that you are able to make in like 3 days are not going to be like world changing. They don't have to be perfect.
Yeah.
But it's a really good way to test out things like new mechanics, new ideas. And a few, big games that you would have heard of have come out of things like game jams. Like, I can't think of any specifics, but like, you can imagine like Baba Is You, I
Mm,
think maybe came out of a game jam because it's a very simple idea and they just expanded on it to
yeah.
make it a full release.
I think that's really
So
cool. Because like what
very
you're saying
cool.
is basically that okay, I want to write a game. Like I want to be involved. So you're saying that like you just kind of put your interest out there. You put your name into like this pool of
Hmm.
other people who are just starting out, and they pair you, or like you kind of like find your team.
Yeah, pretty
Find your
much.
team.
They don't usually force you into teams, but if you
Yeah.
need help finding a team, there's usually like game jam moderators or something like
And
that
this
that
is
will be willing
free.
to help.
Like there's no.
Free. Yeah.
That's actually really cool. I had no idea that that existed.
Hmm. It's a
Cool.
really good resource.
Yeah. So let's go back to Moonstone Island.
Okay.
What like so you spoke a little bit about your inspirations in writing for Moonstone Island. Like what is
Hmm.
your I guess process? So
Mm.
you said that you joined and the game was already in development.
Yeah.
And so you kind of just like looked at the characters and you said, "Oh, this character should have this kind of personality." Like, tell me a little bit more
Yeah.
about how like your process in writing for Moonstone Island.
So when I came on board, Sandy had already sort of got like most of the content outlined. Um, in terms of like, there were going to be dungeons, there were going to be temples, whatever. Um, and a few characters already had names and already had like sort of personalities. And so basically, Sandy sent me over everything he had, which was like a bunch of Google Docs and Google Sheets and things like that, and was like, "Here's what I want you to do. I have a bunch of scratch dialogue written in here. Just rewrite that, but in the same kind of vein." Um, the way the game worked originally was that every character had two daily lines. So you would go up to them, they would say something. If you talk to them again, they would say something else. And then I think it was 16 dates at the start. It may have been less than that, but it was like we have dates, and basically you go on the date, you're given three choices, and then they say some more stuff, and then the date ends. So that was the framework I had to work with. And initially I was basically just filling in the boxes like Sandy asked. Just write daily dialogue uh, and write the dates. But then we started adding more characters. So Sandy would come to me and say, "Okay, we have a fisherman. I want you to give this fisherman a name, and I want you to sort of decide his personality." If Sandy had any ideas or notes, I was thinking this character could be a bit like this or whatever, I would take that on board.
Does the
But
artwork
as
come first? Like, did they have the
Yeah,
artwork for the fisherman already, and you just okay?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. It was art first, and then
Right.
character, and then writing.
Yeah.
Um, so as time went on, I started to get more creative freedom with these kind of things. Sandy sort of trusted me more to kind of say what this character was going to be, what their name was going to be, what their storyline was going to be. And I don't remember fully the order that we added everybody in, but I know that Cleo was the last character that we added. She's the historian. So we decided jointly that Cleo was going to be a sort of lore dump character. So if players wanted to know more about the story of Moonstone Island, if they went on dates with Cleo, she would sort of tell them a lot of stuff.
Cool.
Whereas other characters like Tobin, for example, who's the fisherman, I was able to decide that Tobin had a Newfoundland accent. Sandy and I both live in Canada. I am British, obviously, but I live in Atlantic Canada and not too far away from Newfoundland. And so I wanted to sort of represent something that doesn't really get represented in games ever, really. So I decided to write Tobin in this specific accent and to make references to things that were from Atlantic Canada. And I would check in with Sandy. I'd be like, "Sandy, is this okay? Is this a terrible idea?" And Sandy would be like, "No, that's great." Most of the characters, Sandy had sort of ethnicities in mind
Yeah.
for them. And so most of the time, those sort of made it into the character. Ophelia, for example, is Filipino. Paolo is Spanish. Other ones don't come up so much, but those are the big two for me. It also influenced their names. So I got to pick most of their names. I didn't pick Osono, and I don't think I picked Guyana, but I don't remember. It's all a big blur towards the beginning. And yeah, as time went on, we also started expanding what the characters would do. So we began with just those 2 daily lines, and then we started getting into special lines. The special lines are triggered by specific things. So if it's raining, there's a bunch of special lines the characters can say. If they're in specific locations, like if they're at home or in the hot spring, specific times of day. So if it's nighttime, they'll say things that are appropriate to the nighttime. So they won't be like, good morning. And then we started going, oh God, we need to cut down the word counts. Then we had to get into things like, we cut down the 2 daily lines. It's just 1 daily line because people don't really talk to characters twice in a day. We pretty much kept the dates as is because they're really good. And then we had to go through localization, which was tough. Basically, a bunch of people come to you with questions that are really specific about like all the silly jokes that you've made in English because they need to figure out how the puns translate into French or whatever. So that was a bunch of work that we did over the last like 2 or 3 months before launch, just answering questions. And then, it turned into like having to write the Steam posts and things like that. Once the writing was kind of locked down, I put the writing into work elsewhere, to promote the game. So that's kind of where we're at now. There's still not a lot of game writing that needs doing. If we do any content updates in future, I'll have to get back into it. But for now, it's mostly social stuff, social writing. Yeah.
Yeah. Talk to me a little bit more about the representation and the diversity of the characters in Moonstone Island, because there's definitely quite the colorful cast.
Yeah, this was something Sandy wanted from the beginning, and I was really glad. It's one of the reasons that I loved the game from like the first time I saw it. It's not always a thing that's done in farming games, is this kind of representation, or if it is done, it's sort of clumsy or tokenistic in ways. And so we knew from the beginning that we wanted to try and do this authentically and respectfully and lovingly. So that's sort of baked into the game as much as it possibly could be. And we've sort of seen people reacting very, very positively to it, which makes me glad. But I know that there's also more work we need to do to continue representing people and characters in that authentic way. But basically, the initial seed was that Sandy would say, this person I think is from this cultural background. And it's made a little difficult because Moonstone Island is set in a world where the islands are floating above the earth. So we don't really have that concept of like, this person's from Spain, because Spain doesn't exist.
Yeah.
But we still wanted to represent it. Even if it is in this kind of like fantasy world, we still wanted to have people be able to see themselves. And the gender representation was something that came a little bit later. Now, we knew from the beginning that Rowan was going to be non-binary. But there was a little mishap at one point with like all the documents that we were sending back and forth. So much was going on. And I accidentally made Paolo also non-binary. I forget how it came about, but Sandy was like, oh, Paolo's not the non-binary one, Rowan is. And I was like, oh, hear me out. What if we made Paolo non-binary as well? Why not? Let's have two. And I actually really, really loved that. The more I wrote Paolo, the more I loved the idea of having this character that's in their mid-50s who has like had a child and has lived this whole life, and then in their later years has realized that they're non-binary. And I don't think I've ever seen like older characters be represented in non-binary representation. So I was like, you know what, this is great. Let's just roll with this. And I think it turned out really well. I think it's unexpected, and especially when people first start playing the game, they don't realize that Paolo is non-binary, which is kind of why it matters to have that
Spoiler
representation.
alert.
Because, yeah, is it?
No, I don't know.
It's in the romance menu. It's not immediately
I'm just
obvious,
kidding.
but you can see it from the start. But I think that non-binary representation in the media in general is sort of younger people
Yeah.
who are perhaps more obviously non-binary by the way they present, like, shorter hair, for example.
Right.
And I just wanted to challenge that a little bit, to be like, there's a lot
Yeah,
of
of
different
course.
ways to be non-binary.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
And then our third non-binary character, Guyana, who is sort of more on the side of like women and non-binary. She is a she/they. I'm also a she/they. And being a she/they, using she/they pronouns doesn't necessarily mean you are non-binary. It's just, it's whatever you want it to be. But I consider her non-binary, at least in the game. And she's also an accident. She wasn't meant to be non-binary, but I just looked at her and I'm like, I think she'd use she/they, and it was sort of magical to let the characters tell me that. Once I'd already written everything about her, this was a decision I made like 4 months before launch. I was like, I think she's a she/they, and so we just put that in the game, and it was like, yeah, this is kind of as authentic as it gets. That these characters sort of develop over time and tell you who they are. And also, like, everyone in the game is bisexual because they will date anyone regardless of gender.
Yeah, I think that's a good good choice. I hate when games lock certain characters behind, like, if you're a girl, you can only date this girl, but if you're a guy, you can date like all these girls or whatever. It's a fantasy world. Just like let people.
I do have mixed
romance.
feelings on that.
Oh,
I
me.
really like Dragon Age Inquisition, which does that. It locks characters behind their sexualities, and I think that is actually, for me, it's really meaningful because basically having NPCs that will like you no matter who you are is referred to as player sexual. The idea being like,
is that really a word?
It's a made up word, but yeah.
I've never heard of that.
Like, they're not authentically bisexual.
I see what you mean.
They will just date the player. They are player sexual.
Yeah.
And they won't date each other because that's really hard to write. I would like to have that someday, but it's too hard to write. So maybe. And player sexuality ends up not really feeling like authentic representation because those characters oftentimes aren't going, oh, I'm actually gay, but you have made me realize that I am actually bisexual or something like that. Like, they don't have a story like that most of the time.
I definitely see what you mean there.
But I liked the way that Stardew did it, which is that if you date, I think, Alex, and you're playing a male character, Alex has all this dialogue to be like, you're the first guy I've dated. Likewise, if you date Leah, I think she ended up being my wife, she has a backstory where she has this like horrible, trashy ex. And the ex's gender changes based on the gender your character is. So it feels more authentically like she has a sexuality. It's difficult to do that kind of thing. So what I tried to do as much as possible was just sort of represent people and like personalities that I knew in the real world, and just kind of be like, you know what? Everyone is bisexual. It's not really a player sexual thing. Just everyone on Moonstone Island happens to be bisexual. So
no,
it's difficult, but I hope that comes across.
I definitely see it both ways. On one hand, being able to date whoever you want in the game is great, but also like, when you write a character to be a certain sexuality, that it's more authentic, and like that's how the character was written.
I know it's frustrating to be like, you can't date this person.
Yeah.
Like, I had a whole thing in Dragon Age Inquisition where I wanted to date Dorian, but I couldn't because he was only interested in men, and I was like, okay. But it's fine.
Yeah.
I just dated Iron Bull instead, who was always interested.
Nice. So did you also contribute to like the story and the lore of Moonstone Island?
Somewhat.
Somewhat.
Some of it Sandy had already decided. And so there was a lot of stuff that's like, this is kind of the vague idea of what happened. So things like the cataclysm, I won't spoil too much, but like the cataclysm and the islands being in the sky, and it's sort of being Earth, but also not really. Like it's fantasy enough that it's like, we're not going to acknowledge that this is actual Earth, the Earth that we know and love, question mark, because it could be anywhere. Um, but we got to build on that lore together. If you go on dates with Cleo, you'll find out a little bit more about what actually happened before you came. So you arrive to the island and everyone's like, "Oh my god, an alchemist! Yay!" And I sort of imagine that being like getting a doctor in a really tiny village. If anybody's ever lived in a really tiny village, you'll kind of know what that's like. Maybe this is more of a British thing. I don't know, but you get a doctor and it's like, oh my god, we haven't had a local doctor in 30 years and we've been applying for so long. So I imagined it like that, that you turn up and they're like, oh my god, they actually sent us an alchemist? Incredible. So yeah, it was mostly building on the established world building and lore that we already had locked down. But it was pretty flexible in terms of like what we added onto that. So yeah, we don't go super in depth with the lore because we kind of want a lot of it to be sort of background and you can piece it together if you want, but there's still a lot of questions that we haven't answered because, you know, it's nice to have a little bit of mystery.
Yeah. Is there I don't even know if you could say this. We can cut this out. If you want. Is there DLC planned?
I'd say.
You can't say. Okay. Okay. Well, I guess then just going back, so in the beginning though, you mentioned that Moonstone Island is a creature collecting farming game. And I myself, I don't hate farming games, but I definitely wouldn't consider myself a fan. Like Animal Crossing is pretty much the extent of farming games that I've enjoyed. And I also played Harvest Moon back in the day and absolutely loved. I played so many Harvest Moon games. Magical Melody is the GOAT. Do you agree?
I've never played it, but everyone ever has said that, so I have a copy of it on GameCube, and I've just been too lazy to set my GameCube
so
up.
Good. It's such a good
But I have it. I'm ready.
So, like, what I like about Moonstone Island is that you can indulge in the farming, and like the relationships between the villagers as much as you choose.
Yeah.
And I really like that design choice because because like the game to me looks so great and it's so much fun to play, but I don't too much love the farming aspects of certain games. Like I know when I played Stardew Valley, I couldn't stop just going back and forth between the caves, the mines, and just hunting down enemies because I preferred combat. And I like that Moonstone Island allows you to play that way.
Yeah, me too. It's weird that we have to kind of define ourselves as a farming sim. Like we usually use life sim because it's sort of a catch-all.
Right.
But farming sim is no. It's such a powerful term. It's such
it is
beloved genre that as long as you have an aspect of farming, then you kind of are a farming sim, even if you can ignore it. And it's interesting because I personally, no one has caught on to this yet, but I personally call them, I think, 4F or 5F games. So the idea is similar to like the 4X games where it's like exploration. I don't remember what the 4Xs are, but it's basically like Civilization
Extreme.
Is a 4X game because it has all these X verbs in it. And I like to call farming sims a 4 or 5F because they usually have farming, fishing, foraging, friendship. There's another one that I'm forgetting. Mining, I don't know. And I think that those are kind of intrinsic to what makes these games similar to one another. They usually have farming and fishing and friendship at the very least. and foraging.
Yeah.
So even if they're not like really about the farming, they kind of all have that in common. One day, everybody's going to catch on to me calling them 4F
4F. I like
games.
that. It's
Not
it's good
yet, but
because yeah, you say farming because it's such a broad term,
yeah,
but there's more to it than that. It's almost like everyone knows what a farming game
yeah,
has, but
exactly.
we just still call it a farming game, even though like yeah, like Life Sim
Yeah.
makes more sense. I think just farming game rolls off the tongue better
Yeah,
somehow.
and it's frustrating to be kind of put in the same bucket as Farming Simulator, which we have very little in common with.
Sorry.
Um, and like we have more in common with like Ooblets, but that's not really a farming sim, but it has farming. It's more of a creature collector, but it's gonna be called a farming game, or like cozy game is what people are sort of
Oh
calling
yeah,
this
yeah, yeah.
genre
That's
now.
like the new
But
hot term, cozy,
yeah, wholesome game, cozy
wholesome
game.
game. Yeah.
But that doesn't really tell you what the content of the game
No,
is.
it doesn't. Because you can have like a cozy. I was gonna say a cozy first-person shooter, but I don't know how that would work.
I mean,
Maybe
there's probably one out
you
there.
shoot like stuffed animals out. I don't know.
Yeah,
But yeah, no, cozy. I think cozy. I feel like most people would associate cozy with farming games, but there's certainly, I'm sure, like
yeah.
I've heard people describe I don't know, Ori as cozy. I don't know if you played
I
Ori.
would not agree. It's too
So it's
hard for
very
me. It
hard. It's
stresses me
very
out.
hard. But I
But
guess
like
just
Tetris,
like the
cozy game.
vibes of yeah. I
Exactly.
think it's all about the
Makes you feel cozy.
vibes. Yeah, it makes you feel good.
Yeah.
It's maybe like calm and peaceful, but yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. But I do really like the I really like how Moonstone Island is set up in terms of like the farming aspect, the 4F
Mm.
aspect, because I enjoy like I enjoy a light simulation. I like building a
Mm.
little house for myself,
Yeah.
a little base camp, But I can't say I did not I have not played Minecraft much at all. I think I played for a little bit and I was
Mm.
like, this isn't for me. I don't really enjoy too much of that. Just like building this like incredible civilization.
Yeah.
Not my style, but a little base camp, sure. I'll take a wife, I'll make some friends. That's fun to me, and I like that. I like that it gives you that. It gives you that spectrum of how you want to engage in that.
Yeah. I'm glad that people are picking up on that because
Yeah.
yeah, that was mostly our designer's choice, but being able to have a sort of like fleshed out like bunch of different things you can do, like the farming stuff is it's not super deep because this isn't a farming game, if you know what I mean. But if you want to get into it, you can make a mega farm, you can make it look super pretty. If you want to get into decorating your house, there's a bunch of different house upgrades you can get to make it big, and you can build all the furniture. And then if you want to just like do Pokemon, then you can do that as well.
Yeah.
And ideally, people do a little bit of everything. Um, and we have the skill trees as well. There's like a skill tree for
Hmm.
everything that you can do, and so you can max out those. And it's the reason the game takes like 50 hours to play because there's so much to do.
But
And
that's
the
great.
fishing, of course. There's a whole fishing thing.
I'm sure you could speed through the game and probably beat it in less than 50 hours. But it's
You could, yeah. Wouldn't be fun though.
nah.
It might
So
be. I don't know.
we're kind of winding down here. I guess how did you play Moonstone Island? What tell me about a little bit about your experience playing the game and what choices you made.
Oh, well, I always am torn between Farah and Guyana, like apparently everyone else on the internet. Um, and annoyingly, like when I first got the game, which was at this point a year ago, I was like, oh, I'm going to build the most beautiful farm. I'm going to make everything perfect. And then, of course, because the game was still in development, like I lost my save because I couldn't carry it over. Like we kept upgrading, updating the game, and we kept like
Hmm.
moving platforms from like itch to Steam. And for a while, I was playing in a special secret browser version because that's all that we had. So I don't have like a canonical save because I'm always like, no, it'll just get deleted again. um, but I have a cute little house that's like I have a special magic room that's just for my cauldron, and I've decorated it all witchy. I keep my furnaces inside. Most people don't, but I like mine to be inside, even though there's a
that
fire
sounds like a
hazard.
hazard. Yeah. If only
Um,
Moonstone Island had a fire department.
yeah, no, well, they don't have anything. So like no hospital or anything. I tried not to think too hard about that because if you get bogged down in like
Sure.
law,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
where it's like, oh,
Because like you add one thing and then like, oh
yeah,
well, I need to add this to like balance this out.
yeah,
Yeah. I
exactly.
agree with you.
So I just didn't worry too much about it. They mentioned doctors sometimes. In
DLC.
my head,
DLC
it's like,
firefighter.
no,
Okay. You heard it here first,
I don't
folks.
want fires. I mean, there's the island that's on fire. That's about as much fire as you get.
No representation for the firefighters out there.
I know. I'm sorry, firefighters. I love you very much. It's written into the game, but I picture that there are really big islands that are sort of more like cities where they have everything, and this is sort of like a small village on the outskirts where they get deliveries every now and again. But they don't have a doctor. If anything's really bad, you have to get like flown to the other islands. I don't know how that happens because no one can fly except you. But don't worry about it. Don't worry about it too much. I forgot what the question was.
We were just talking about like your save file and like the choices.
Yeah. Okay. Now I do play a lot of Minecraft. I'm like hundreds and hundreds of hours.
I'm sorry if I
Minecraft.
offended you before with my.
Oh
comment.
no, it's fine. I know it's an acquired taste because you kind of have to do everything yourself. But I have a lot of very intense Minecraft builds. But the thing that I like to do is have my bed very close to the entrance of my house because chances are, if I'm running home, I need to go to bed immediately. So also in Moonstone Island, I like to have my bedroom being the first thing when you walk in, so I can be like bed, 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 bed. So that's my pro tip is to have your bed really, really close to the door.
What in case you pass out 2 steps before you reach it?
Yeah, that happens a lot. Yeah. I also have multiple houses. So if you have multiple houses, they're all connected. They're like a pocket dimension. So if you put a house out on the other islands and you go in it, you'll have access to everything that's in your main house. So I like to keep at the very least a tent in my pocket at all times and a spirit barn in my pocket at all times so I can access home and my spirits whenever I need to.
Smart.
People haven't really picked up on this. It's you could just put down a house and be like sleep and now you're in bed. Great, you did it. Or if you need to like rearrange your spirits, you can just put down your spirit barn and you don't have to go all the way back home. I'm pretty sure that's still the case. I'm pretty sure it is.
You would know better than me.
I know, right? But we've changed so much that sometimes I say things and it's like that's not true anymore. So I want to get in trouble.
If anyone is an expert on Moonstone Island, please let us know down in the comments below if you can do that, because that is a big pro tip.
It is a pro tip, and it really helps when you're in a pickle, which is a lot of the times on the outer islands. There's some bad stuff out there. Scary.
What monsters are? What are some of your favorite monsters? Spirits. Sorry.
I'm gonna admit, we have most unreleased games have a little debug menu, so you can just give yourself stuff because you need to test things, and it's tedious to have to like get the spirits or like trigger a scene from scratch. So we just have commands to do all of that. So I actually cheated most of my spirits. I know, gasp. But my favorites. Oh, what are my favorites? I mean, Fluffox is an easy one. Fluffox is one of the very, very early spirits that you can get, but he's just so cute. Fishbow, I've got little fishbows everywhere. So I am the reason Fishbow is kind of our unofficial mascot because I love Fishbow so much. I'm just like, Fishbow. Who else? I like the Misty Slime and Cool Slime. Those are from Terraria. We had a collab with them. Radlad is our Ooblets collab, and I love Radlad as well. I think a lot of the psychic spirits are really cute. They're sort of pink and adorable. There's like a cat and a deer and a hat. They're all a little bit weird, but I like them.
Yeah.
Beardini is a psychic spirit. There's a bunny with really long ears. I like him.
Cool. And that actually brings me to my last question, which you just reminded me I wanted to ask you, because you mentioned Fishbow. I'm very impressed by like your guys' Twitter account.
Thank
How
you.
how did you grow the Twitter account? Because at least from my experience, there are a lot of indie games out there, and not many have like the kind of reach that I feel like your team
Yeah.
has been able to capture. So why don't you tell me a little bit about that and how
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
grew your guys' Twitter account?
So there's a lot of answers to this question, and hopefully I can get through them all. Number one, Sandy gets a lot of credit for building up the Twitter account before I came on as the community manager. Basically, most of what Sandy was posting before I came on was like the Screenshot Saturday posts.
Yeah.
Those sometimes they just absolutely blew up because our art is so pretty that
Yeah.
everyone's just like, "What is this game?"
Yeah.
And a lot of that is also down to Kokofi, who is our artist, who is just incredible. It's so good at pixel art, and so yeah, just being consistent with Screenshot Saturdays made a really, really, really big difference. Showing off features in development. We had a very, very slow build for most of our Twitter accounts' existence. So we sort of got up to like 20K before launch. And then I came on, and I don't know what happened. I mean, I do. I don't want to be like, whoa, accident. I think my main tips are number one, find community managers that you like and get friendly with them, talk to them. I'm very lucky that I have been around for long enough that I know a lot of incredible community managers, like the Bugsnax community manager, the Among Us community manager. These are all my actual friends. So I was able to just like watch how they do it and take inspiration from them. But also, a huge part of running a community is actually paying attention to the community. I think a lot of people maybe don't realize how important it is to be a member of the community yourself. Not just the person who's like, look at this, now look at this. You should be paying attention to what they're doing, what they're enjoying, what they're saying, and spin that into tweets, contents, memes, whatever. If you acknowledge the things that you are seeing within the community will feel seen, they will feel important, they will feel cared for, and it makes such a huge difference. Since launch, that's basically all I've been doing is I go into streams, I introduce myself, I say thank you for playing our game, I watch what they're doing, I interact with the people in the chat, and I just kind of see all the stupid jokes and like mishaps they're getting into.
Yeah.
And then I take that to Twitter. I acknowledge that it's happening, and people really like seeing that. In regards to our like growth, a lot of it is down to our publishers, Raw Fury, giving out codes.
Yeah. Shout
We
out.
opened
I got one
up.
from them.
Yeah, we sent out a lot. Like a lot
Yeah.
of people have access to this game now. We put out a call like, who wants to play this game before launch? And one, people love playing games before launch. Two, people love playing games for free, and three, people had heard of the game at that point, so they were keen. And we got thousands of replies to the various places that we said to apply for codes. And not only did that sort of boost the tweet so that more people saw Moonstone Island, but it then meant that a bunch of people had codes. So before the game went live, we had loads of people streaming it, making YouTube videos about it, and so on. And that did a lot for just like our visibility in general. And some of that was luck, and some of that was hard work because Raw Fury had to handle all of those requests, and I had to handle all of those requests. But it paid off massively. People are streaming the game every day. It's amazing, and like thousands and thousands of people have seen it on stream.
Yeah. it seems super successful, and that makes me happy.
Yeah, it's been interesting. And this is just the start. Like, we're hoping that there will be a really good long tail with these things. I wanted to get up to 45,000 followers before launch. I ended up hitting that the day after launch, which I think is still fine, still counts. And now we're almost at 46,000. So I see that it's just going to kind of continue exponentially. We had millions of views on our tweets, like the week before launch, and then the week of launch, it just went like,
Yeah,
it's very cool.
it's awesome.
Mm,
Well, that's about it. That's you told
cool.
me everything I needed to know.
Okay.
Thank you so much for chatting with me. Is there anything else that you want to let the people know before we sign off here?
We're gonna keep updating the game. You know, this isn't the last you're gonna hear from us. We're actively working on patches, but we're also discussing, content updates or whatever. Like, we see how Stardew Valley does it, and although that's insane, like supporting a game for like 10 years after launch, that's daunting, but like we love this game. We made this, it came from our hearts, and we would like to keep supporting it. So, if you have suggestions, or if you just want to express that you like the game, we would love to hear from you. I read every single tweet that people tweet at me. That's all me. So, just come say hi. Come say nice things. Yeah.
And besides at moonstone underscore game on Twitter,
Mhm.
is there anywhere else that you would like to point people in the direction of?
Um, Mostly I'm moving away from Twitter on my personal account. So I'm on Blue Sky, but I don't really post much. I think the best place to follow me personally is
Yeah.
on Instagram. I'm at How Not to Draw. If you want to follow Moonstone Island, we also have a Discord, which is very active. I'm also running that, so you can come say hi on that as well. We're actually currently looking for mods, so you can go and apply for that if you want, depending on when you're listening to this. And we don't have an Instagram, but we do have a TikTok. I think we're Moonstone Island Game, but I don't. Or I wish everything was the same on all our platforms, so I'm just going to check. Give me a second. You can follow us on TikTok. We're also Moonstone underscore Island underscore game. We're hoping to post some more TikToks on there. And we would really appreciate it if you come and talk to us and like all our terrible videos. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. I'm gonna include all of those links down in the description below. Yeah, thank you so much, Kate. Let us know in the comments down below what you guys think of Moonstone Islands. If you have anything to say about our little conversation here, and also drop a like, subscribe if you haven't already. Go check out Moonstone Island game, and yeah, I'll be seeing you. Peace out. Say bye, Kate.